Hello, everybody, and welcome to another RevOps Co-op digital event. I am Matthew Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op. We have a global community of 16,000 plus revenue operators from all over the globe. And today we are sitting down with Stephanie Martin and Joe Sexton to talk through why predictable revenue remains elusive and how you can actually fix it, essentially cracking the growth puzzle. But with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Stephanie for her to do some more introductions, talk a little bit about herself and Joe, and then to ultimately pull up some slides and help us get started on the discussion. So Stephanie, why don't you take us away?
Great. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Martin, and I am the VP of Revenue Operations here at XFactor. I've spent almost 2 decades building and running go-to-market teams and working in revenue operations organizations and fast-scaling environments, enterprise software, and cybersecurity. And I've seen firsthand how complex and chaotic revenue planning can get. And even when you've got the best intentions and the strongest talent, it's still tough. So I'm joined today by XFactor board member and revenue legend, Joe Sexton. And we're here to share some research with you about this struggle and how to fix it. So, Joe, do you want to say a few words?
Thanks, Stephanie. So I've seen the movie from both sides. Just a brief background. I was with Computer Associates years ago, about 160 million, took it to, or was part of the team that took it to 4 billion. Mercury, I was 300 million, took it to a billion, got acquired by HP for 4.5 billion. Went to McAfee, took that from 1.2 billion to 2.5, got acquired by Intel for 7.7 billion. And then tried the startup land with AppDynamics. Went there when they were about 28 million. When I left, just under 4 years later, we'd grown that by 10 times to 273 million. So I've seen growth from the sales side of the equation, but I've also seen it from a board side. I'm on 5 boards right now. I was on the board of CrowdStrike for 8 years. Joined them, they were about 25 million, left when they were about 1.7 billion. And then PagerDuty was an advisor to the CEO there, Jen Tejada. And the same thing, 25 million, took them to an IPO. So I've seen both sides of the equation. Looking forward to the conversation and hopefully give some people some ideas of how to fix it.
All right, well, let's jump right in. And so first, I just want to talk a little bit about our point of view and what we're seeing out there and what we're hearing from a lot of leaders is there's really 3 big challenges that everything collapses into in go-to-market. One is that revenue just is unpredictable. It's really hard to know exactly how things are going to turn out. Because of that, profitable growth is really elusive. And to empathize with a lot of the folks that do what I do is that revenue operations is hard. It's hard to get your arms around all this stuff. And so we're seeing this as evidenced in a lot of research out there through Gartner, Salesforce, and Gong saying that, first of all, growth is the number one thing that people are concerned about when they're trying to run their teams. But the teams are missing numbers and reps are missing quotas at a very, very high proportion. So there's a problem out there. And the reason why it's so much of a problem is because, what we're trying to do ultimately is orchestrate and tie together teams to make the revenue engine really run efficiently. And that's hard to do, right? You have teams that are oftentimes reporting to different leaders, they have different priorities, different budgets, et cetera. Yet all of their work is interconnected and there are a lot of interdependencies between the groups. And if you struggle to really get these things working together, I think that's what leads to a lot of the issues that we just talked about. And just to quote one of my favorite thought leaders in this space, Stephen Diorio, from his book, Revenue Operations, is the team that can connect the most dots here wins. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. So this is what we're keeping in mind, right, as we're working at XFactor and developing the solutions that we're working on. Because of all this complexity, because there's so much disparate data and teams and misalignment, there's a lot of hidden issues that are underlying the reasons why you see the missed targets and the unpredictable growth. There's stuff lurking behind the surface. And the challenge is that Most revenue operations or revenue teams in general just don't see those problems until it's too late. They're looking back instead of looking forward. They see what's going on in opportunities. They're focusing on opportunity forecasting maybe, but there's a lot more to it underneath that can be hard to surface. Teams are in this growth guess gap where they're trying to work out how to grow, how to organize, allocate resources, how to quantify and measure the various inputs and outputs to making that revenue engine work. And let's face it, we're using a lot of spreadsheets for this right now, a lot of assumptions. Some of those assumptions are not broadly understood or well documented. And plans then, even once the best plans are rolled out, they oftentimes change really quickly at the beginning of the year due to unforeseen circumstances. Could be organizational changes or market shifts and that type of thing. And it's really hard to then react if you've just spent the last few months creating a really great spreadsheet model and then you have to go back and rework it. My opinion and what I've seen and what I've felt in my role is that the current status quo of trying to deal with these problems is not sustainable. The tools that us as RevOps and CROs have at our disposal just simply hasn't kept pace with the amount of complexity and sophistication that we need to work with. And in this new era of AI and machine learning and tools that can really help, this to me is the perfect opportunity to look at how we can try to solve these problems. And I first just want to start out by giving a little background on this research that we did, because it's one thing that Joe and myself and all the other folks that we talked to are saying the same thing, but we just wanted to reach out to the audience out there of other professionals to see what their thoughts were on some of this stuff. And so we launched a survey to dig into this, and we heard back from about 226 executives that range from sales, marketing, RevOps, finance, and distilled all that information down. And we're going to share today with you some of these results. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. Let's see if you agree with some of the things that we're hearing. And so I want to open this up feel free to add your comments in the chat, questions. Joe, let's talk about this first one because this one stands out to me. 94.6% of the people that responded to our survey are not confident in their annual plan, even when they're doing all this planning and reviews. So, is this surprising to you? What are your thoughts on this one?
I would have guessed 80%, so 94.6 is certainly higher than what I thought. But when you think about it, it's not all that surprising. The dance that everybody has to go through every year, and I'll lay this out, and it probably is going to sound familiar to everybody on the call, is right around June, you start doing what I call the food fight. You come up with a budget and a target from the board usually and the CEO, and then you work with different groups, and it gets really complex. You've got finance and marketing and R&D and sales and administrative and customer success, and it goes on, and everybody's trying to get what they need to help achieve the plan. That goes on for about 6 months until it gets through the process, the board approves it, it's given to the sales leaders and so on to go execute on. The challenge is that the data's not current, the data is not consistent, so finance will have different data than sales and so on, and so the data doesn't align. And usually it starts out with, okay, here's the sales target, here's the budget to make that target, but because we've got a finance and R&D and customer success and different groups that need their own funding, and it's a balloon squeeze. And so it ends up being less money for sales than what they originally thought. The unfortunate thing is the targets usually don't change. And it's kind of one of those to the sales leader, stretch and make the target. And sales leaders, they've got a good ego on them or they wouldn't be in sales. And, by golly, we'll go do it and take the hill. And what you're left with is a plan right out of the gate that's destined to fail. I think there's 3 things that go into being successful on the sales side. One is activity. That's the quantitative aspect to it. The other one is selling value, and I won't spend any time on that, but that's the qualitative piece, which is how's your activity playing out in terms of making sure customers are getting problem solved and recognize the value that you deliver to do that. The big one, though, and the third leg of that stool is capacity. And that's both quantitative and qualitative. And that's the hardest one, I think, that is yet to be solved. And there's so much that goes into that. Capacity, you start with yields. How much are sales reps actually selling? If you ask most sales leaders, what's your ramp time on a sales rep, they'll tell you 3 to 6 months, either 3 months or 6 months, sometimes 9 months. And when I hear that, my first reaction is, you really don't know. Because in the end, the question should be answered with a question. Well, are you talking about mid-market? Are you talking about inside sales? Are you talking about commercial? Are you talking about enterprise? Are you talking about strategic, global, which geo, and so on? And it's just a very complex thing to solve. It has to be solved because much like in technology, most CEOs get the fact if you don't have enough R&D resources, you're not going to get products out on time. They're not going to be high quality. It's the same thing for sales. If you don't have enough sales capacity, you're not going to meet your targets and you're not going to meet them in a timely fashion. So it's a really big challenge. So 94.6, a little surprised. I'd guess more like 80, but it's not that shocking.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. In this one, 51.1% say revenue targets feel unrealistic or disconnected from execution. Why do you think that's happening? And is that a bottoms up or a tops down problem or both?
I actually think it's mainly a tops down problem in that those numbers usually come from on high. And then again, you're supposed to go out and gather the metrics to make sure that it's realistic. And the challenge is it really needs to be both, right? It needs to be a top down target, a bottoms up target, and then meet in the middle. But too often, as things move towards getting approval, you start running out of time, and the people that are making the decisions are the tops down folks. And everybody likes a target that reflects growth, smart growth, I like to call it. So it's profitable growth. And usually that balloon squeeze affects the sales folks and their teams at the very end. And so the reality is it needs to be both tops down, bottoms up, meet in the middle. And too often it's tops down, a little bit of bottoms up, but hey, here's the plan, let's go with it. And that's why people feel disconnected and not confident in meeting their target.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I've seen happen a lot. And I hear from folks is that they just don't have enough proof to say either I can or can't meet that number. So this is a big problem. Okay.
Quick question for you, I
Sure.
don't know, Joe or Stephanie. So first, I'll ask Ava's question. She was asking about capacity. Can you give a quick tutorial, or how do you define that? What's the actual formula for capacity?
Very good question. Matter of fact, it's the key question. If you get it right, your chances of success are through the roof. If you miss it, you're a dead man walking or a dead lady walking, right? Because you're signing up to something that's not realistic. Here's capacity. It's very, very, very simple, but yet complex. The first thing is you have to understand your ramped versus unramped. How many ramped reps, in other words, have been there, they've been enabled, they're now ready to achieve quota, at least 80%, I think is what I use to determine they're in the game. Then you have your unramped. So you're going to go through the year and you're going to hire people, and depend on how long it takes to ramp them, to enable them, we'll go into the productivity. And the key metric here is not quota, it's yield. So what do they actually do? So it's a very hard number to determine because, like I said, it's dependent on the role, depending on the geo, depending on what products you're selling. So it gets very, very complicated. I like to equate it to a Rubik's Cube, getting all the elements to line up so that you understand what your actual capacity is very hard. So ramped, unramped based on yield. And the third one is very critical as well, and that's attrition. And attrition is not the same. So attrition for tenured reps is much different than a rep that's been there 6 months. So again, a 3-year tenured rep is going to have a book of business. Losing that person is going to be way more painful and harder to replace than somebody that's only been there 6 months and just didn't connect with the company and the selling effort. So those 3 factors, very math oriented, but very, very hard to get precise, accurate, and real-time up-to-date numbers because there's so many elements that go into it.
Yeah, I would agree. I myself have built those models in Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets, and it can take a long time and it can be fraught with data issues or math issues, assumptions, and it can get very complicated very quickly. I found that doing it in Excel, you're not monitoring that throughout the when people come and go, what is that doing to your overall capacity, right? That's really, really hard.
The other thing is once you understand what your ramp time is, and this is very important, let's say the expert enterprise rep is, and it should be 6 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days in this geo. Then And once you have that established, then you can start dialing into getting that number down. Because getting people ramped faster is a huge increase to productivity and a huge decrease in cost. It's something that is very important. And then once you have it, you drive that number down because every day, especially in large sales organizations, just add tremendous amounts of bottom line money from greater productivity, lower cost.
Yeah. The ramp thing is, I think, something that a lot of people can just take for granted. Like you said, Joe, you ask someone that question, they'll just say 90 days, 6 months, just because. And then you ask them one more question of why. They're like, I don't know. That's just what I assume it is. But you start to do the math out over all those teams and all those heads that you have on those teams. And like you said, that translates into real dollars and large dollar amounts. So huge amount of opportunity there. And one more question I'll ask for both of you, and then we can keep moving, is these first two kind of talked about developing the annual plan. Matthew brought up this idea of dynamic data and kind of moving towards a rolling forecast instead of a kind of one and done annual plan. So how does that play into how you all see the world?
Well, that's utopia, but again, you've got to have that real-time accurate data, and therein lies the challenge because it's basically what, we're driving on at XFactor, which is to give you an always-on plan. So not only do you establish the plan, but right out of the gate, you can start monitoring it, the key performance indicators, we call them X factors, to see am I ahead or behind. If I'm ahead, keep going. If I'm behind, how do I course correct and adjust so I can get back on track? So that's really what we're driving on. What I think the market's looking for is an always on plan.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to use as an analogy is to borrow from forecasting world. Everyone's familiar with their daily, weekly, quarterly, monthly forecasting cadence, right? And that's looking at opportunities. And what we're trying to do is really always looking at the strategy in that way and looking to see if the plan is going to perform as a whole, not just are we going to close these deals this quarter. It's all the pieces that kind of, again, if to use that iceberg analogy, it's all the stuff under the surface before it even gets to an opportunity.
And unfortunately, Stephanie, it forces people to really hyper focus on the current quarter. And it's done at the expense of the next quarter, the next 2 quarters, the next year.
Right.
So when you're forced to all hands on deck to make the quarter, it's at the expense of the outlying quarters.
Agreed. Okay. Well, here's another one that I think we can all relate to is that nearly 60% of people say they don't integrate capacity, territory, and demand gen, so marketing planning, when they're putting their annual plans together. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Why is that the case?
Well, I don't think it's for lack of effort or lack of desire. I think it's just everybody's in their swim lane. And again, that data is not coming together in integrated fashion. And people are talking past each other. I used to really push for what I call a marketing sales interlock. And the fact of the matter is, marketing's role is to make sales successful. So if you're not selling what you should, marketing's not successful. And it's not that one's superior to the other, but sales is marketing's customer. And then you have to have the capacity to take advantage of when marketing brings you those leads. I do think one of the things I was really big on and still am, I'm not a big believer in MQLs, marketing qualified leads. I call those vanity metrics. And I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but what I really look for, and sitting on boards now, but when I was running sales, is what I call sales qualified leads or sales accepted leads. I want to know how many opportunities you're bringing to the sales reps that they accept and go run with because they're good leads. And I'm not trying to be Glenn Ross, but I mean, they're meeting the target type customer. There's clear proof that there's a need and a budget and so on and so forth. And those are the metrics I look for. And that's hard because just having people inquire about companies and so on, that's not really what you're looking for. You're looking for, are we hitting the target in terms of the desired prospects, timing, and qualification and so forth. So I think that it's really hard to do though, because again, it's not that people don't want to do it. They don't have the capabilities to do it because the data is not integrated and it's not real time.
Yeah. And they're not using the same systems oftentimes to even plan out those numbers.
Yep.
Okay. Now here's one that we can all relate to, I think. 90% don't trust more than 75% of their pipeline. Said differently, they're only trusting 25% of their pipeline as good. So, Joe, as a leader, you've done this many times. What are some of the things that you've seen work to try to improve
Yeah,
that?
some of the things I think sound simple, and I have a lot of folks I talk to, and they're like, "Oh, yeah." But are you really doing them? And I'm a really big believer in one of the three legs of that three-legged stool is activity, and activity with a purpose, and inspecting that. So one of the things I can tell you that I thought was world class, we did at App Dynamics, is every Friday, the regional director, who had about 6 to 8 reps, would sit down and talk to the rep about one thing, and that only one thing for a half hour each Friday. It wasn't about the pipeline. It wasn't about forecast. It wasn't about deals. It was about activity. What did you do this week? And what are you going to do next week? And there was key metrics in terms of new business meetings, first meeting decks that were presented, second meetings, and so on, but to inspect that activity. And not just what's the number and like a spreadsheet exercise, but here's some ideas to increase your activity because I'm seeing it with other reps and this is working. And I think that too much time is spent on deals, if you will, at the end instead of at the beginning of the process. Our philosophy at App Dynamics was if you have a huge pipeline and you're okay at sales, you'll do fine. Ours was 6 times the number, 6 times. Most people talk about 3 times the target. Ours was 6. We also did a lot of stack ranking. I'm a real big believer in that. So if you're driving on a certain number of new business meetings a week, then show that in terms of the team. You don't necessarily have to give statistics in terms of money and so forth, but at the same time, show stack rankings. Who's leading the pack in terms of activity? Who's in the bottom third? I mean, in sales, you don't want to be in the bottom third. You want to be in the top third. If you're in the middle third, you want to achieve to go up to the top third. But the way you do that is you have colleagues put pressure on each other. I'm not telling you this is how many meetings you got to do. I'm telling you these are the leaders. This is what they're doing. And I guarantee it usually translates into results. And then the other thing I think is different activities. And I'm a real big believer on tell me of all the deals in these stages, how many have a value proposition? A simple question, right? So you've done a proposal, you put it in upside, you put it in commit, whatever stage. How many of those have a business ROI associated with that proposal? And then spot check and see, does this make sense? Can the rep explain it? Does it make sense to me? And then have you done this with your coach or your champion and practice with them so that when you're not in the room, which is usually the case, and they're having to present that business proposal, it makes sense. And so spot checking and having metrics with stack rankings, I think, gets you deeper in the inspection side. Last one, just a real simple idea was, if you got this in commit, have you talked to them this week? If the answer is no, that's coming out of commit because I've got a saying, if they're not telling, you're not selling, right? So if you're not talking to a prospect that's in commit and you're dependent on that deal for the quarter and you're not hearing back from them for whatever reason, Houston, we got a problem. And so just really getting into the activities that lead up to the forecast, which is commit and upside and pipeline and so on. But start from the beginning, stack rank and against each other's peers, and then drive on metrics that make sense.
That's great. 58.9% say deals slip through the cracks due to poor follow-up. So that kind of plays into what we were just saying. If you're not really closely looking at the follow-up and the process and the rigor around that and the activities, that's a big area of revenue leakage, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I got to tell you something. It was always frustrating. As a sales rep, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And I know that sounds simple, but you'd be surprised at how often that's not the case. In addition to that, find a reason when somebody's getting into a late stage of a deal to talk to them about something every day, not about the deal, some information about the market, information about your company, some interesting things so that you have a way of touching them in various ways, text, email, phone call, go see them. Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and find ways to communicate on a constant basis so you're top of mind. And the last thing I'll tell you is usually, again, if they're not whispering to you, it's competitive. There's 3 companies going for the business, but you're okay. Do these things. I mean, that's what you hear when a deal's getting ready to happen. They're not supposed to tell you. You can't tell anybody, but that's just reality. And usually that's a good sign that a deal's going to fall your way. Last thing, let me add one more thing. RFPs, I think I've seen one in my career that you didn't write that came to a deal. Because usually when you get an RFP, somebody else has written that with the customer. And so very important to get in front of it. if you're going to answer an RVP that you helped write it.
Seen that many times. Okay, going back to what I was saying at the beginning is that over 60% of us are still relying on spreadsheets for forecasting and planning. In this new AI era, why are teams still doing it this way?
I think you play the hand you're dealt, and AI is not hype. I'll talk more about that in the presentation later because I really want to drive on that point. But you work with what you got. And unfortunately, it's still a spreadsheet world when it comes to forecasting and planning. I think that those days are getting ready to be over. One analogy I would use is you can keep doing long-handed math and you'll probably know a lot about math, or you can use a calculator and give me the calculator. I'll be way more productive and way more accurate. And so I think it's a matter of AI is not something that's this magical thing out there that you just buy AI, right? You basically incorporate it in what you're using, making sure that whether you buy it or you're building it yourself, that artificial intelligence and all that productivity is part of it. One of the things to look for in today's world is not somebody that bolts it on because you're not going to get the full benefit of it, but somebody that builds it from the ground up. Because like anything else, when it's native to a solution, it works way more effectively than trying to put lipstick on the pig. It's bolting something on because that's the hottest, latest thing. But again, I just think people are unfortunately working with what they got, but I can assure you that's getting ready to change and getting ready to change fast.
Okay, 40.1% say their team is mostly reacting to problems and not executing a proactive plan. So how do you see teams becoming more proactive and finding issues before it's too late?
Well, I think that the first thing you've got to be able to do is escalate up KPIs, we call them X factors, but things that are an indicator that things are going awry. The problem is today, because you don't have access to the data, it's usually not right, it's not timely, you don't see it until it's too late. And like anything, if you can course correct when something's starting to trend in a way you didn't expect and make that correction, your chances of a good outcome go way up. And so getting those in front of decision makers who can take action and get the ship back on course is critical. I think the challenge today is it's really hard to do. Because like I said, it takes 6 months to build the thing. The thought of getting something in a real-time fashion, even on a weekly or monthly basis, is almost unheard of. That's getting ready to change. But that's the challenge. When you're in a reactive mode, you're doing the best you can, but usually you're behind the curve instead of getting in front of it.
Yeah, we need more predictive tools, that's for sure. And this is one that I can really relate to, is that still almost 30% of teams are spending almost half their time on manual data work. And this seems crazy to me. And it was one of the more frustrating things about my job, is that I felt like my time could have been so much more effective and valuable doing other things than doing a lot of manual data cleanup and trying to create some of these sophisticated models. I needed some help. I wanted to get out of that world. So how do you see technology innovations now changing that and moving people out of the business of that manual work and into some of the more problem solving and valuable growth oriented actions that they need to be doing?
I'll use an analogy, and maybe not perfect. Let me tell you a little story about a kid that I read about. He's 14 years old, and he builds this application, and it's for cardiologists. And basically what it does is it takes all the data that when you go see a cardiologist that they gather, and it brings it into his application, and it can look at 40 different kind of conditions with your heart. And what was amazing about it was his accuracy in terms of the diagnosis itself was 96%, and the doctors were 54%. Not that doctors aren't smart, not that doctors aren't experienced, but the fact of the matter is, when you have the diagnosis, here's the problem, you can be way more effective at treating it. And I think the same thing in terms of sales and sales operations. It's not that it's going to do your job, but it's going to make you way more productive and way more effective at solving problems because you're spending time on the problem and addressing it instead of all the work that goes into trying to get there. And then, running the risk of how many times you go to the doctor, try this and come back and see me in a couple of weeks. I'd rather say 96% chance you got this, and here's what we're going to do to treat it. So it's the same way in sales. It's like, I used to, with my sales ops people, John Jung worked with me at App Dynamics, and he used to come in my office with data. And before he left, I'd say, hold on a second, what do you think this is saying? I'm not saying I'm going to agree with it or whatever. What's your opinion in terms of what this data is telling you? I think that this is getting ready to change dramatically so that people will be focused more on here's where the issue lies, here's what instead of trying to do that manual type effort, it takes too long, not accurate, not timely, that we're in the mode we're in today. And I think that's going to be a massive change and make people not just more productive, they can have more fun because solving problems is a lot more fun than spending all this time to figure out what the problem
That's
is.
right. Yeah, for sure. I agree 100%.
Joe, one question from the audience I'll throw out there now. You're on all these different boards, and so you've seen a lot of things go right and obviously things that have gone wrong as well. So one question from the audience was, what should CEOs be asking their RevOps teams today that they're probably not currently asking? As a board member, seeing a lot of different companies operate, what are some things that you typically advise CEOs and C-suite on to go and ask their operations teams for help or support? What are some things that you typically see or guidance that you typically give?
It's interesting because I think from a CEO perspective and a board, one and the same almost, because the CEO reports to the board and they advise him or her. I think that because there's not transparency, and that's a key issue, because everybody's not operating on the same level of data. So usually finance has the best and most current, sales has their own, marketing has their own, and so on. But I do think that there's a little lack of trust sometimes because look, salespeople want the lowest target they can get and the most time to get it, right? I always say if you had 10 years to make your quota, it wouldn't be a big deal. Of course, you wouldn't start until probably 9.5 years into it. But I think that being able to go to RevOps and say, what's the truth here? From your perspective, taking everything into account, almost like an unbiased view, do we have enough capacity? Is our ASP what it should be? Is our close rate what it should be? Are people really doing value selling like they should? And are they doing the activity? So getting the metrics, I think, from sales operations without a bias from sales, because again, everybody wants the lowest target and the best chances of making it. I think that's what I encourage is transparency. It's still hard because, like I said, everything's not real time and accurate and so forth. But getting that kind of, you got a finance view, but get that sales operations view, right? And then try to marry the two and see where you're off. It may not be something you want to hear. You may not have enough capacity. You either got to do two things, lower the target or increase the capacity and hire some people. And you got to figure out where that money comes from if you do. But that's the thing I advise is it's best to deal with reality and the truth than try to shove it and you'll pay for it in 6 months or a year when all of a sudden you miss your targets and you're wondering why.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just wrap up the survey piece. How real is the growth guess gap? Revenue leaders rated it 3.7 out of 5, nearly a quarter called it game changing. So AI is going to help to eliminate manual forecasting and improving go-to-market alignment. Most people are really behind it here, is what this is saying. So let's talk about how then our point of view at XFactor and how we look at this and how we think the AI and automation is going to help. And just a couple quotes to back up what Joe was saying earlier is that AI is not an add-on thing. It is the thing. This is from our friend Chris Lockhead. Best served with a native AI platform, something that's built on an AI architecture. I don't want people to feel intimidated or worried about AI replacing their jobs. Just like Joe said, the intention is to give the teams superpowers, right? And give them the calculator for the difficult math problems and to be scanning and watching. You think about it like in the cybersecurity world. This is an analogy I like to make is that you've got lots of tools out there looking for vulnerabilities, looking for threats. It's constantly watching stuff that no human could ever pay attention to at any given time, right? And there's tools that kind of correlate all that information. Well, why shouldn't a go-to-market team have that, right?
I shouldn't go to market have a SIM just like
Yeah.
security does. And it's really interesting. You get time, go online and look up the Rubik's Cube being solved by a group of kids. There's four of them, I think, from Purdue. And they used a AI robot and they didn't solve the Rubik's Cube in 10 seconds, which would be impressive, or even a second, which would be outstanding. They did it in 0.1 seconds. And that visual, when you watch that, is the point, right? If you can always have that Rubik's Cube solved in real time so that you can spend time making decisions and course corrections and taking action, that's how to think about it. And that's what AI does. It enables all that. Here comes a wave, get the surfboard out. Don't stand in the wave come crashing down on you.
Right, right. So this kind of illustrates that a little bit. This is our point of view, right? Is that this concept of always operating your plan or always operating the strategy is like an ongoing circular process. And it starts with setting the strategy and documenting it, making sure that it's doable, putting that into practice, starting to execute using various different types of tools like value selling and other efficiency and effectiveness measures, and then constantly measuring that. How am I doing? What's going on? What could go wrong? What's going off track? How bad is this problem? I think we struggle with that. We talk about wanting to be data driven all the time. And the key to being data driven is making sure that whatever it is you're measuring is calibrated to the success of your plan. Is this a problem? Yes or no? Is this something that could impact the plan? Yes or no? Is it going well or not going well? If it is, how good is it? If it's bad, how bad is it? And those are really hard things to do all at once.
But I think the other thing, Stephanie, is being able to take that and look at it from a predictive perspective. So in other words, this is a problem and here's the action I'm going to take, but what's that going to do? I've got a familiarity with a company that they wanted a massive pipeline. So it was like student body left, everybody focused on pipeline and from the CEO on down. Well, the challenge was they accomplished it. They built this massive pipeline, but what they didn't think through was their sales cycle was 9 months to a year, the next 3 quarters. So we built this massive pipeline, but at the expense of the next 3 quarters. And so again, sometimes too much medicine is not a good thing. And so here's the action we can take, but what will that mean? And helping you think through all those different outcomes.
And then finally, just the ability to refine and adjust. If something is not correctable, what am I going to do about that, right? If I don't have enough budget to hire more salespeople and my capacity is not going to allow me to meet the number, now what do I do? These are the kinds of things that you need to have a handle on in real time so that you can adjust those plans and then everyone feels comfortable of where you're headed. And that can be good or bad. Things start to go really well. Maybe you're ahead of plan and you can account for that as well. So I think it goes both ways. So this is how we think about it, right? So this is the mentality that we have as we're working through our platform. And just a little bit about, again, big picture, how we're thinking about attacking this problem is that we believe that there should be revenue operations as a system. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of bringing these teams together and correlating and aggregating data. You need a platform for that. This is hard. You need that calculator. You need something that will do this math. And not only that, but you need something that can bring in data from various different places to get you the answers to some of those hard math questions. So our platform is really the central operating system for this, where we're going to take in data from various places, CRM, marketing automation, various different things. We can import spreadsheets and things, and we'll continue to expand the types of data that we're going to bring in from conversational intelligence or other planning tools, maybe. We're going to bring in all this data and correlate it together so that we can surface these insights, so that we can give you the what if scenarios about if you're putting this plan together, is that going to enable you to make the number? If it is, great, let's continue to operate and look and see what's going on in all these different places, keep us on track, or if there's some serious gaps, we want to know about that ahead of time and course correct. So,
and together systems of record. So
yeah.
Finance systems, HR systems, payroll systems, marrying that with CRM and so on. The thought of bringing all that data together so you can normalize it. And now when you're talking about ramp times and yields and so forth, it's fact-based. And I think the key is if everybody who's part of the decision is working with the same data, there's not going to be the food fight, right? It's going to be fact-based. And it's like, here's what we got and here's what we can do. And therefore, here's the plan. And so that go-to-market for, that SIM go-to-market, I think, is the concept that we're driving here.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And as we're talking about AI, I think what people really want to know is, well, what is the AI going to do for me in this scenario? And so we wanted to make sure we're clear about the types of applications that AI can be really beneficial for. These are some of the hard things that we do in RevOps. And as revenue leaders like yourself, Joe, we're always trying to figure out what is the best territory alignment. Are we distributing our territories, accounts across our territories correctly? Again, do we have the best plan? Do we have a shot at making the plan based on what's going on underneath the surface? Are we allocating our resources correctly? And can we help automate some value selling? You've alluded to that a couple of times. And we haven't talked about it much in this discussion today, but we do have value selling capabilities as part of our platform for salespeople, right? Because we know value selling leads to bigger deals, shorter sales cycles, longer term customer relationships when they understand the value that they're getting, right? So we can help automate some of those things, helping you figure out your hiring plan. What's the best plan? When do I need to hire people in order to reach my goals this year, next year, the year after, et cetera? So these are just some ways that the AI that we're thinking about and developing are going to help teams and do help teams right now. And so I think the solutions and the reasons why we're so bullish on this idea of what we're calling growth AI, which is AI designed for the purpose of growing revenue. Ultimately, what this does helps you spot and capitalize on growth opportunities, like things that are going well, deals that are going well, practices that are going well, reps that are doing well, territories that are doing well. Let's figure out what's going on there and do more of that. We can help mitigate revenue leakage. So again, with this always on, always watching idea, we can help you spot areas of revenue leakage, like follow-up issues, like deals that are stalling, like things that are not going well with the BVA, business value assessments. And we can help increase conversion and lead effectiveness. One of the things that I love about it is I can see where people are not following up on leads quickly enough. Like we have SLAs, we need a very rigorous handoff or qualification process. And when that breaks down, like I know that I've got to get on top of that. And that's not something most people check every day, but every day I wake up and I see that right front and center, which is really helpful.
I think the key, Stephanie, is you want to double down on what's working, do more of it. The other side of that, where things are not doing so well, I think people a lot of times focus on, okay, if there's not enough pipeline, let's go to marketing and get more leads, right? But you really have to dig into, well, what's causing that? And I'll give you an example. A lot of times, I think one of the most important things you can do in any sales organization is a first meeting deck. So when you go and you show up at a prospect, what does everybody say? And the key question is it effective? Does it get you to the second meeting? So sometimes it's what's causing this in the process itself and addressing that than something that seems, let's just get more leads. Well, why get more leads if the quality, and that's that qualitative thing of the selling process, is stuck? So it allows you to focus on what the real root cause is instead of fixing the symptom. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, I would agree. So yeah, reducing the cost of planning and adjustment. Like let's shrink the amount of time we're spending on trying to crunch some of these numbers and just get to the point. What do we need to do? Make it faster, make that planning process move a lot faster. Let us be able to adjust more quickly when things are changing. And then hopefully improving ramp retention. At the beginning, remember I said there was a big issue with reps not meeting their number or hitting their quotas, like 80%. I think I know why that is. I think there's a mismatch between understanding the productivity rep, an expected yield, and then the quota that they carry. And if we can try to bring those together, I think we get people with realistic goals, people who feel like they can make a difference and make their number, and feel like they can stay a lot longer because they're invested in the company and the company understands what they can do. So
one of the key elements is the retention, right? You give people big quotas that make the board and the CEO feel good, but then all of a sudden you have attrition and Houston, you got a problem again, right? Quota is meant to set a number so that people can be successful, but still stay within budget, right? The yield number and the attrition numbers, those are the key metrics, I think, that lead to successful sales outcomes.
What would be, Joe, one question Wilson asked a while back, but I'm curious since we've got these things up here on the screen now. His question was, if you had to prioritize one lever to pull in the next 6 months to reduce revenue volatility at an organization, what would it be? So hearing that, where would be the first place you would look? If I was a CEO and I was like, hey, Joe, revenue volatility is all over the map. One quarter we're up, next quarter we're down. I can't figure out why. What would be the first place that you would look?
The first place I would look, and sound like a broken record, would be, are they value selling? Are they, when their proposals are going out, show me the ROI proposal that goes with it, and does it make sense? And can the rep explain it in a way that I would believe it? I think the other thing is not just an ROI, but an ROI that the prospect agrees with. That's always so important, because typically these ROIs get put together without a whole lot of input from the prospect. And now it gets in front of a CFO and they're like, I don't believe that. Make the prospect part of the process. And one of the things we did at AppDynamics, and I know a lot of companies that I advise do the same, is as you're getting touch points with the prospect and they're validating, yeah, this is the way I do it now. Here's how I do it with your solution. That's the business outcome to my company. Can you quote them? It's like, I'd love to include you in the proposal with the business case that says you're the one that validated this. We had one at AppDynamics, had 30 people that validated different aspects of the deal. And so the ROI itself becomes much more believable, because it's not me that's saying it, it's the prospects people. And it's way harder to say no to their own people if you're the CEO or the board or the CFO, whoever's making that final decision, than some vendor coming in saying, you give me $1 and I'll give you back $3. So it's high quality value selling. Inspect it to make sure that it is high quality and believable. And I think you'll see deals start happening faster, bigger ASPs, and win rates will go up, way more predictable, because people buy value. They don't buy technology and bells and whistles.
Love it.
Well, that is the conclusion of our talk today, Matt and Joe. Thank you so much. This is a great conversation. I hope we got a lot of people thinking about the topics that we covered today and reflecting on some of their own things that they're facing. And hey, if you're looking for solutions or you want to talk to us a little bit more, we hope you'll reach out.
Yeah, so Joe, Stephanie, thank you very much. To all the attendees that are out there, like Stephanie said, she's actually in the RevOps Co-op Slack group. So if you're in there, you can hit her up anytime. I dropped her LinkedIn profile in the chat before. Feel free to hit her up on LinkedIn, Joe's as well. XFactor.io is where you can learn more about them. But with that, we're basically out of time. So I'm going to let you all run. Stephanie, Joe, thank you very much for being here today, dropping some knowledge. To all the attendees, thank you for joining as well. That's all I got for you. I'll see you on the flip side. All right, take care. Bye now.